Chapter 6 The Dream Work. In one dream, which I have hitherto only touched upon, astonishment and the subject emerging is distinctly expressed at the outset. In one dream, which I have hitherto only touched upon, astonishment and the subject emerging is distinctly expressed at the outset. The elder Brooke must have set me some task or other. Strangely enough, it relates to the preparation of the lower part of my own body, the pelvis and legs, which I see before me as though in the dissecting room, but without feeling the absence of part of my body, and without a trace of horror. Lois N. is standing beside me and helps me in the work. The pelvis is eviscerated. Eviscerated. Now the upper, now the lower aspect is visible. And the two aspects are commingled. Finally, I wandered through changing landscapes with an Alpine guide who carried my things. He carried me for some distance, out of consideration for my tired legs. The ground was swampy. We went along the edge. People were sitting on the ground, like red Indians, gypsies. Among them a girl, usually. Until then, I had made my way along with slippery ground, in contest astonishment that I was so well able to do so after making the preparation. At last we came to a small wooden house with an open window at one end. Here the guide set me down and laid two plaques, which stood a readiness on the window sill so as to break the chaos which had to be crossed from the window. Now I grew already alarmed about my leg. Instead of the expected crossing, I saw two grown-up men lying upon wooden benches which were fixed on the walls of the hut, and something like two sleeping children next to them, as though not the plaques by the children were intended to make the crossing possible. I awoke with terrified thought. The elder Bruce must have set me some task or other. Strangely enough, it relates to the preparation of the lower part of my own body, the pelvis and legs, which I see before me as though in the dissecting room, but without feeling the absence of part of my body, and without a trace of horror. Lois N. is standing beside me and helps me in the work. The pelvis is eviscerated. Now the upper, now the lower aspect is visible, and the two aspects are commingled. Finally, I wandered through changing landscapes with an Alpine guide who carried my things. He carried me for some distance out of consideration for my tired legs. The ground was swampy. We went along the edge. People were sitting on the ground like red Indians or gypsies. Among them a girl, Until then, I had made my way along the slippery ground, in constant astonishment that I was so well able to do after making the preparation. At last, we came to a small wooden house with an open window at one end. Here, the guide set me down and laid two planks, which stood in readiness on the windowsill, so as to bridge the chasm which had to be crossed from the window. Now I grew really alarmed about my legs. Instead of the express crossing, I saw two grown-up men lying upon wooden benches which were fixed on the walls of the hut, and something like two sleeping children next to them, as though not the planks, but the children were intended to make the crossing possible. I awoke with terrified thoughts. I shall make this dream only the one example of astonishment in dreams, which makes its appearance in the parenthetical remark. Strangely enough, let's consider the occasion of the dream. It is a visit of this lady, Lois Ann, who helps me with my work in the dream. She says, "Lend me something to read." I offer her she, by Rita Howard, a strange book but full of hidden meaning. I try to explain the eternal feminine, the immortality of our emotions. Here she interrupts me. "I know that book already, haven't you? Something of your own?" "No, my own immortal works are still unwritten." "Well, when are you going to publish your so-called latest revelations, which you promise us, even we should be able to read?" she asks, rather sarcastically. sarca- sar- sarcastically. I now perceive that she is a mouthpiece for someone else, and I'm silent. I think of the effort it's cost me to make public even my work on dreams, in which I had to surrender so much of my own intimate nature, the preparation of my own body, which I am ordered to make in my dream, is thus the self-analysis involved in the communication of my dreams, but the further training of thoughts proceeding from my consideration with Lois N. go too deep to become conscious. They are sidetracked by way of the material which has been incidentally awakened in me by the mention of Rida Haggard's she. The comment, strangely enough, applies to this book, and to another by the same author. The heart of the wood words and the numerous elements of the dream are taken from these two fictitious romances. The swampy ground over which the dreamer is carried, the chasm which has to be crossed by means of plank, come from she, the Red Indians, the girl, and the wooden house, from the heart of the world. In both novels, a woman is the leader, and both treat of perilous wandering. She has to do with an adventurous journey to an undiscovered country, a place almost untrodden by the foot of man. The wooden house is assuredly also a coffin, that is, the grave. But in representing this most unwished for all thoughts by means of a wish fulfillment, the dream work has achieved its masterpiece. I was once in a grave, but it was an empty Etruscan grave near Oriveto, a narrow chamber with two stone benches on the walls, upon which were lying the skeleton of two adults. The interior of the wooden house in the dream looks exactly like this grave, except that stone has been replaced by wood. The dream seems to say if you must already sojourn in your grave, let it be this Etruscan grave, and by means of this interpolation it transforms the most mournful exception into one that is really to be desired. Unfortunately, as we shall learn, the dream is able to change into its opposite only the idea accompanying an effect, but not allow the effect itself. Hence I awake with thoughts of terror, even after the idea that perhaps my children will achieve what has been denied to their father has forced its way to representation of fresh allusion to the strange romance in which the identity of a character is preserved through a series of generations covering 2,000 years. I shall make this dream only the one example of astonishment in dreams, which makes its appearance in the parenthetical parenthetical remark. Strangely enough, let us consider the occasion of the dream. It is a visit of this lady, Louise N., who helps me with my work in the dream. She says, "Lend me something to read." I offer her She by Rider Haggard, a strange book but full of hidden meaning. I try to explain the internal feminine feminine, the immortality of our emotion. Here she interrupts me. I know that book already. Haven't you something of your own? No, my own immoral works are still unwritten. Well, when are you going to publish your so-called latest revelation, which you promised us even we should be able to read? She asks rather sarcas- sarcastically. I now perceive that she is a mouthpiece for someone else, and I'm silent. I think of the effort it's cost me to make public even my work on dreams, in which I had to surrender so much of my own intimate nature. The preparation of my own body, which I'm ordered to make in my dream, is thus the self-analysis involved in the communication of my dreams, but the further trains to thought, proceeding from my conversation with Lois N., go too deep to become conscious. They are sidetracked by way of the material which has been incidentally awakened in me by the mention of Rider Haggard's She. The comment, strangely enough, applies to this book and to another by the same author. The heart of the words and the numerous elements of the dream are taken from these two fantastic romans and the swarming ground over which the dreamer is carried, the chasm which has to be crossed by means of planks. come from she, the red Indians, the girl, and the wooden house, from the heart of the world. In both novels, a woman is the leader, and both treat of perilous wonder. She has to do with an adventurous journey to an undiscovered country, a place almost untrodden by the root foot of man. The wooden house is surely also a coffin, that is, the grave, but in representing this most unwished for of all thoughts by means of a wish fulfillment, the dream work has achieved its masterpiece. I was once in a grave, but it was an empty Etruscan grave near Orvieto, a narrow chamber with two stone benches on the walls, upon which were lying the skeleton of two adults. The interior of the wooden house in the dream looks exactly like this grave, except that stone has been replaced by wood. The dream seems to say, if you must already sojourn in your grave, let it be this Etruscan grave, and by means of this interpolation, interpolation, it transforms the most mournful expectations into one that is readily to be desired. Unfortunately, as we shall learn, the dream is able to change into its opposite only the idea accompanying an effect, but not always affect itself. Hence, I awaken with thoughts of terror, even after the idea that perhaps my children will achieve what has been denied to their father has forced its way to representation, a fresh allusion to the strange romance in which the identity of a character is preserved through a series of generations covering 2,000 years. I think it would be superfluous to multiply such examples. They would all confirm what we have learned from those already cited, namely, that an act of judgment in a dream is merely the repetition of an original act of judgment in the dream thoughts. In most cases, is an unsuitable repetition fitting into an inappropriate context occasionally. However, as in our last examples, is so artfully applied that it may almost give one the impression of independent intellectual activity in the dream. At the point we might turn our attention to that psychic activity which, only it does not appear to cooperate constantly in the formation of dreams, yet endeavors to fuse the dream elements of different origin into flawless and significant whole. We considered it necessary, however, first of all to consider the expressions of act which appear in dreams and to compare this with the effects which analysis discovered in the dream thoughts. I think it would be superfluous. I think it would be superfluous to multiply such examples. They would all confirm what we have learned from these already cited, namely that an act of judgment in a dream is merely the repetition of an original act of judgment in the dream thoughts. In most cases, it is an unsuitable repetition, fitted into an inappropriate context. Occasionally, however, as in our last example, it is so artfully applied that it may almost give one the expression of independent intellectual activity in the dream. At this point, we might turn our attention to that psychic activity which, though it does not appear to cooperate constantly in the formation of dreams, yet endeavors to fuse the dream elements of different arranging into a flawless and significant whole. We consider it necessary, however, first of all to consider the expressions of affect which appear in dreams, and to compare this with effects which analysis discover in the dream thoughts. Chapter 6 The Dream Work. In one dream which I have hitherto only touched upon, astonishment at the subject emerging is distinctly expressed at the outset. The elder Bruce must have set me some task or other. Strangely enough, it relates to the preparation of the lower part of my own body, the pelvis and legs, which I see before me as though in the disconnecting room.
The Dream Work.
The Dream Work.
7.
7.
In one dream, which I have hitherto only touched upon, astonishment at the subject emerging is distinctly expressed at the outset.
Distinctly expressed at the outlet.
The elder Brugger must have sent me some task or other. Strangely enough, it relates to the preparation of the lower part of my own body, the pelvis and legs, which I see before me as though in the dissecting room, but without feeling the absence of part of my body, and without a trace of horror. Louise N. is standing beside me and helps me in the work. The pelvis is eviscerated. Now the upper, now the lower aspect is visible, and the two aspects are commingled. Finally, I wandered through the changing landscapes with an alpine guide who carried my things. He carried me for some distance out of consideration for my tired legs. The ground was swampy. We went along the edge. People were sitting on the ground like red Indians or gypsies. Among them a girl. Until then, I had made my way along on the slippery ground in constant astonishment that I was so well able to do so after making the preparation. At last we came to a small wooden house with an open window at one end. Here the guide set me down and laid two planks which stood in readiness on the windowsill, so as to bridge the chasm which had to be crossed from the window.
Bridge the chasm which had to be crossed from the window.
Now I grew really alarmed about my legs. Instead of the expected crossing, I saw two grown-up men lying upon wooden benches which were fixed on the walls of the hut, and something like two sleeping children next to them, as though not the planks but the children were intended to make the crossing possible. I awoke with terrified thoughts. I shall make this dream only the one example of astonishment in dreams, which makes its appearance in the parenthetical remark, strangely enough. Let us consider the occasion of this dream. It is a visit of this lady, Louise N., who helps me with my work in the dream. She says, "Lend me something to read." I offer her She by Rider Haggard. A strange book, but full of hidden meaning, I try to explain. The eternal feminine, the immortality of our emotions. Here she interrupts me. I know that book already. Haven't you something of your own? No, my own immortal works are still unwritten. Well, when are you going to publish your so-called latest revelations, which, you promised us, even we should be able to read? She asks rather sarcastically. I now perceived that she is a mouthpiece for someone else, and I am silent. I think of the effort it cost me to make public even my work on dreams, in which I had to surrender so much of my own intimate nature. The preparation of my own body which I am ordered to make in my dream is thus the self-analysis involved in the communication of my dreams. But the further trains of thought proceeding from my conversation with Louise N go too deep to become conscious. They are sidetracked by way of the material which has been incidentally awakened in me by the mention of Rider Haggard's she. The comment, strangely enough, applies to this book, and to another by the same author, The Heart of the World, and numerous elements of the dream are taken from these two fantastic romances. The swampy ground over which the dreamer is carried, the chasm which has to be crossed by means of planks, come from she. The Red Indians, the girl, and the wooden house, from the Heart of Wood. In both novels, a woman is the leader, and both treat of perilous wandering. She has to do with an adventurous journey to an undiscovered country, a place almost untrodden by the foot of man. The wooden house is assuredly also a coffin, that is, the grave. But in representing this most unwished for of all thoughts by means of a wish fulfillment, the dream work has achieved its masterpiece. I was once in a grave, but it was an empty Etruscan grave near Orvieto, a narrow chamber with two stone benches on the walls, upon which were lying the skeletons of two adults. The interior of the wooden house in the dream looks exactly like this grave, except that stone has been replaced by wood. The dream seems to say, if you must already sojourn in your grave, let it be this Etruscan grave. And by means of this interpolation, it transforms the most mournful expectation into one that is really to be desired. Unfortunately, as we shall learn, the dream is able to change into its opposite only the idea accompanying an affect, but not always the affect itself. Hence, I awake with thoughts of terror, even after the idea that perhaps my children will achieve what has been denied to their father has forced its way to representation. A fresh allusion to the strange romance in which the identity of a character is preserved through a series of generations covering 2,000 years. I think it would be superfluous to multiply such examples. They would all confirm what we have learned from those already cited, namely, that an act of judgment in a dream is merely the repetition of an original act of judgment in the dream thoughts. In most cases, it is an unsuitable repetition, fitted into an inappropriate context. Occasionally, however, as in our last example, it is so artfully applied that it may almost give one the impression of independent intellectual activity in the dream. At this point, we might turn our attention to that psychic activity which, though it does not appear to cooperate constantly in the formation of dreams, yet endeavors to fuse the dream elements of different origin into a flawless and significant whole. We consider it necessary, however, first of all to consider the expressions of affect which appear in dreams, and to compare these with the affects which analysis discovers in the dream thoughts.